Resident Evil has always been a quirky franchise, from Wesker's psychopathic yet charismatic villainy to Chris punching boulders for fun. And no matter how dramatic or outlandish things got, you were in for a good time. But after the catastrophe of RE6 that almost killed the franchise, Capcom decided to scale things back a bit with RE7, going back to its humble roots, minus the terrible voice acting.
It's me, Chris.
Is that you, Rebecca?
And with the overwhelming support from veterans and newcomers alike, this led the groundwork for the other games going forward. And as short as Ethan's story was, he left a lasting impact on the community by introducing the average, everyday man who gets caught up in the cold-blooded world of bioterrorism. And they continue that trend with Grace Ashcroft, an FBI agent whose years of training never prepared her for the horrors to come. So grab a snack, kick back, and relax as we jump back into the ruthless world of Resident Evil. We first meet Grace at her job, buried deep in her work, so far down the rabbit hole that everything around her is as distant as a hazy daydream. But her boss brings her back to reality with a mission she never thought she'd be assigned to: a recent murder case at the Wynwood Hotel, the same place where Grace's mother died in her arms so many years ago. Nothing left but ash and locked away memories. And despite how questionable it was for the FBI director to even consider dropping this in Grace's lap, she finds her resolve through gritted teeth and stammering determination, hoping to learn more behind her mother's murder. It's at this very moment we get a glimpse of her character, where most people would go straight to HR to discuss the director's blatant insensitivity to their mental and emotional well-being. Grace accepts the assignment with silent ambition, teetering on the edge of anxiety. And no matter how painful it is to relive that traumatic night, she can't help it if it means uncovering the truth behind it all. She is the daughter of Alyssa Ashcroft, after all. For those who don't know, Alyssa Ashcroft was an investigative reporter from the game Resident Evil Outbreak, where her and many others fought their way out of Raccoon City before it was nuked to hell. After that, she focused her attention on exposing Umbrella as the evil corporation it was. Her story wasn't considered canon until RE7, where you can find one of her articles investigating the Baker family incident. She eventually became a freelancer, often investigating BOWs and other anomalies, but the path of pursuing the truth is often filled with pain and persecution, as she always had a target on her back from those who work in the shadows. And no matter how hard she tried to protect herself and Grace, her exploits eventually caught up to her. The weight of her legacy thrust upon Grace's shoulders. The only cold comfort during that fire was passing the torch over as she can finally rest after carrying the burden for so long. So in a way, it's only natural for Grace to be an FBI agent, having learned all she knows from one of the world's greatest reporters, including how to pick locks. And so she makes her way to the hotel to investigate, eventually making her way to the room 204 where everything started. Instead of a warm, cozy setup with an excellent room service, she's met with a large pile of photos of her and Alyssa. Now, any rational person will see the red flags and be on high alert, but as suspicious as this is, she can't help but think about that fateful night. At first glance, you'd be wondering, how the hell did she ever make it to the FBI if she can't see the obvious trap she's walking into? And while many of us wouldn't take the bait so easily, I at least understand why Grace can't focus her mind on the task at hand, and that's because it's filled with so many emotions: fear, anger, guilt, so heavy on her conscience it clouds up her better judgment. FBI agent or not, she's still human, someone with emotions and trauma who's forcing herself to confront everything she would rather forget. That alone shows a sense of inner strength that has yet to reach its full potential. That vulnerability reminds me of Rose Winters and the pain she went through growing up as a BOW, always being seen as nothing but a monster instead of the teenage girl who wanted to fit in a world that had no place for her. And while many of us will never know what it's like to be a BOW, we know all too well what it's like to feel ostracized because of something out of our control, such as our ethnicity, culture, or environment, among many other reasons. And like Rose, we learn to accept who we are and make the most of it. These moments of vulnerability speak volumes to me, as it reminds us that these characters are still human, no matter how strong or in control they appear to be. But that moment quickly fades away as she finds her resolve, remembering the folder Alyssa left behind. Unfortunately, she doesn't get much time to read it as she's forced to fight off a zombie, only to be choked out 5 minutes later. Probably cussing out her boss for throwing her in this mess before everything fades to black. When she comes to, she's strapped to a gurney, her life draining from her body one drop at a time in some random hospital. You can see the fear in her eyes and feel the panic in her voice as she screams for help. but her pleas are swallowed up by the silence because there's no one around to hear. Granted, Leon is just a few hallways down. But he's busy at the moment. So Grace calms herself, just like her mother taught her, and quickly gets herself free. I find Grace pretty fascinating. She's introduced as this nervous and clumsy character who's prone to panic attacks. She comes off so anxious and apprehensive that you forget she works for the FBI. And yeah, she isn't a field agent who specializes in combat. She's a technical analyst whose intellect, resourcefulness, and quick thinking landed her one of the hardest jobs to get. And these qualities really start to shine when you see her adapt to whatever situation she's in and find the right solution within seconds. A constant complaint I hear about Grace is that she feels incompetent, often making dumb decisions, such as failing to notice the obvious trap she was walking into when she saw the pile of pictures of her on the bed, or not calling for backup right after fighting off a zombie. Her choices are very questionable, to the point that it contradicts the compliments I just gave her. And no matter how much you like a character, you can't defend bad writing, an issue that Capcom still struggles with to this day. But a lot of the characters make questionable choices. We all called Ethan an idiot for traveling to Louisiana alone after getting a message from his supposedly dead wife. We all looked at Chris differently when him and his crew shot up Ethan's wife without simply telling the man it was Mother Miranda in disguise. But did anyone find it weird that Leon went on a murdering spree when he found out that Ashley was held hostage in the village? The moment he found proof that she was there, that should have been the end of his investigation. Instead of contacting the CIA for backup, Leon takes out every villager he sees. And this is before he finds out their plans for world domination. Las Plagas or not, that doesn't look good from a legal standpoint. American agent guns down Spanish village. So Grace is no different from previous protagonists. But sometimes you have to take the good with the bad, even at the cost of common sense. But even so, I like seeing how Grace progresses throughout the story. Ethan Winters is by far my favorite character in the series, but as much as I like him, he was pretty bland. And you would have thought him risking life and limb to save his missing wife would bring out more of his personality. But he reacted to most of the terror like it was a minor inconvenience on a Tuesday. Now it's obvious that Ethan was experimental, because it wasn't until RE8 where he felt like his own person, giving him much more emotional depth when trying to save his daughter. Now, I love Leon, I love Chris, Claire, and Jill, but when they're introduced, they didn't have enough depth to them that kept me interested to see them survive, aside from just beating the game. We see their personalities start to grow as the franchise goes on. Claire's determination in Code Veronica, Jill's bitterness in RE3, Leon's survivor's guilt in RE4, and Chris's insecurities and self-doubt in RE5 and 6. We watch them grow and develop throughout the years. But that's what sets Grace and Ethan apart from the others. They start their stories off with some form of emotional attachment or trauma that motivates them to keep fighting through the horror. And as they fight to survive, watching them overcome their own obstacles keeps me engaged to see how it all ends. It's probably because I'm getting older, but I enjoy the more relatable characters with layers to them, as opposed to the more flashier ones with one or two character traits and nothing more. Honestly, if there's anyone in the RE universe who needs much more character development, it's Ada Wong, a mystery wrapped in secrecy and obscurity. But I digress. But if you're interested, please feel free to check out my video on her. And unlike the games before it, Requiem has a very character-driven story behind it, affecting everyone on a very personal level. Grace and Emily's connection to Elpis, Leon and Sherry's affliction, forcing them to confront their past with Raccoon City, as well as Victor's obsession with Spencer's vision for human evolution. There's a lot of duality throughout the game that goes beyond just the gameplay. And even though the game is split between Grace and Leon, it's clear she's the main character in the story, an anchor that ties everything together, including Spencer's guilt and remorse for the countless crimes he committed throughout the years. And as much as I like Grace, this is the biggest issue I've had with her story, so spoilers ahead. Alyssa isn't Grace's biological mother. In fact, we don't know who her parents are because she was adopted by Spencer. Yes, the same Spencer who kidnapped numerous people and experimented on them, created bioweapons that led to mass murder and destruction, killed his own colleagues to take complete control of Umbrella, and made Albert Wesker into the sexy superhuman bioterrorist who was going to destroy the entire planet had it not been for Chris and Sheva stopping him. Yes, I know what I said. The crimes he committed against humanity was all for the sake of human evolution, and for him to be at the peak of it all as a god. But now on his deathbed, he regrets everything he did up to that point, and to make amends for his tyrannical transgressions, he adopted Grace. Not to experiment on or to carry on his legacy, but to give an innocent child a chance at life. And that's really sweet and noble of him. Real shame about the countless children he kidnapped whose lives were filled with endless suffering, all for the sake of science. And at some point, he began cloning children, so they never had a chance to be anything more than guinea pigs. Of course, adopting wasn't enough to make amends, which is why he created Elpis, an antiviral agent that's a universal cure for all infections from bioweapons. Again, that's very commendable, but he wouldn't need Elpis if he didn't pave the way for bioweapons in the first place, considering that Umbrella's research was used by other companies for their own agendas. Personally, I believe people can change for the better if they truly want to, but Spencer's remorse and redemption felt so out of place because at no point did he seem that way, aside from the interview with Alyssa. And even then, it didn't have time to breathe and settle with the audience, to accept this more humanized side of Spencer. But it's so jarring when you think about all the awful atrocities that he's committed that could have ended the world several times over, especially moments before Wesker killed him in RE5. Moments before he died, he still spoke nonsensical nonsense about his ambitions on becoming a god. His sense of superiority is what led to his undoing. So to see this old man with a god complex turn over a new leaf and adopting some random kid to make up for it, it's pretty hard to accept. In a way, I understand how Victor misinterpreted Spencer's final wishes, because the old man did a complete 180. And considering Spencer's research on memory transfer and immortality, I don't blame Victor and Zeno into thinking that Grace was special, the one to carry on Spencer's legacy. And while it was a neat little twist that she wasn't what the game hyped her up to be, it felt disappointing because there was nothing about her that made Spencer cherish her beyond, yeah, I just adopted her. At this point, it could have been any other child and it wouldn't have made a difference. In my opinion, it would have made more sense if Grace was directly related to Spencer as his daughter, or better yet, his clone. Being the narcissist that he is, he would treasure her as a tool to further his own goals. But the more time he spends with Grace, the more he nurtures and protects her as a daughter he never had. From his time as a father, he would finally understand just how precious human life is, and how wrong he was to want to shape humanity into his own image, leading to the creation of Elpis and undoing all the harm he's done. Obviously, it wouldn't make him a hero, but it would at least give him a deeper sense of character, while justifying why everyone thinks Grace is crucial to his final wishes. What made Ethan unique was that he was just some regular guy from California who got roped into all this, and aside from his very questionable regeneration, that's all he was. A regular guy, and the games kept it that way until it's revealed that he became a bioweapon after getting infected with the mold. It was a nice revelation because it wasn't in your face. But with Grace, we're constantly told of how special she is, someone who can shake up the very foundation of the world through her connection to Spencer and Elpis, only to be told at the last second, yeah, all that was a lie. That's not clever. That's damn near disrespectful to everyone who was truly engaged in the story. And by all means, this isn't a mini rant on me hating Grace, because I like her a lot as a character. It's more on the writing itself. It felt like a lot of investment with very little payout. I don't mean to harp on this too much, but it's hard to ignore it when it's so integral to the overall plot, and I can't help but wonder if Grace had a larger role in all this, but the writers chose to backtrack a bit later in development. Of course, this doesn't take anything away from her, as she's a great character in her own right. And you continue to see that when she meets Emily, a blind girl who's locked up and used as a guinea pig for Victor's experiments. The same experiments that turn her friend into an angry and aggressive monster who lashes out at anyone who comes near the hospital. What started off as an awkward partnership between the two in order to escape this madhouse developed into a relationship akin to a big sister protecting her little sister, very similar to the dynamics between Claire and Sherry all those years ago. But for Grace, it's a lot more personal. It's a lot more deeper than just wanting to save someone because it's the right thing to do. In a way, Emily is Grace's chance of redemption from failing to save Alyssa. Of course, Alyssa's death wasn't her fault, but that doesn't stop her from seeing a failure every time she looks in the mirror. Leon's conscience is constantly burdened by guilt from those he couldn't save, despite it never being his fault. As people, we can't help but blame ourselves at the suffering of others, always thinking we could have done something, anything differently that would have led to a better outcome, but failing to understand that we did all we could in that moment, and we carry this guilt as a way to atone for our shortcomings, weighing us down like sin itself. And with Grace fighting to save Emily, it's her way of redeeming herself from Alyssa's death. All of that guilt, regret, and anger explodes when Emily is seemingly dead as Grace desperately tries to revive her, moments before she transforms into a bioweapon. But blinded by her emotions, she can't accept the monster Emily's become as she berates Leon, who has no choice but to put her down. With yet another death on her conscience, she's checked out. Nothing left to fight for. Nothing left to live for. So Victor takes the opportunity to convince her to come with him to uncover the truth behind her connection to Elpis. And a lot of people criticize this point in the story, because why would you go with the man who put you in this whole mess in the first place, and was possibly behind your mother's murder? And to that I say, yeah, why would you? But at the end of the day, she is Alyssa's daughter. That inquisitive mindset, that obsession to uncover the truth won't let her pass up this opportunity. So it makes perfect sense when you see it from a different angle. And though that choice was questionable, she ultimately made the right call. Having learned the truth behind her connection to Spencer and seeing him in his final years thanks to her mother, she figured out Elpis' true purpose, to make amends with the world. And that in turn saved Leon and Sherry from a gruesome death, as well as everyone else who suffered at the hands of Umbrella. At the end of it all, Grace confronted and conquered the pain and trauma of her past that led to saving the world from all existing bioweapons. That's a pretty great way to introduce a new character in the series. And soon, we see her back at work, catching up with Leon while finalizing her report. Honestly, I really hope she was on sabbatical off screen, because why is she at work so soon? Either way, it ends on a high note as we see a picture of Emily and Grace, the little girl's eyesight restored. Really, I wasn't sure how to segue Emily's survival into the script, because it felt out of nowhere when Leon told her that he didn't hit any of her vitals, which is kind of crazy because I was trying to. And how did he know where her vitals were? That's the first time he saw her transformed. Her heart could have been in her head for all we know. Not to mention, did Leon know she would revert back to her human state if he didn't kill her? And if he didn't know that, why would he keep her alive to suffer as a bioweapon? See, this is the kind of crap I'm talking about. The more I nitpick at the story, the pettier I come off as. But sometimes I can't help it when writing the script, especially after the second playthrough when I'm being a lot more analytical. But when all is said and done, Grace's story is something we can all relate to. The need to face the ghosts of our past. And whether or not we want to, we can't keep running from the pain we wish to forget, because it will always linger in the deepest corners of our subconscious until we decide to confront and conquer it. I don't know if we'll ever see Grace again, but her struggle does symbolize what we're all capable of if we set our minds to it, and that it's just a matter of taking that first step. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and please, feel free to like, subscribe, turn on notifications, and join the conversation. And I'll see you in the next video. Take care.